cover each other and support each other when, if one of us was at Arena and someone is like, well, I'm talking to Arena, what should I do? What should I say? That's an important phone call to get. And it's an important phone call for me, I think, to really truly answer in a responsible way. And I think it's happening more and more. How do you navigate from an institution to a presenting house to performing in a club, which my company still does to this day? Because we know even though you are invited to the institution, next season you are kind of forgotten, or you don't have a show or whatever, and you got to go back. So our mechanisms constantly change and morph and evolve. And what I think and I hope is the next steps is that, one, conversations happen here, and conversations happen without necessarily a grant, that they can happen in coffee shops, they can happen in people's living rooms, they should happen in coffee shops and living rooms, they should happen after shows, it should happen on the internet, that artists, and I'm very fortunate to feel like I have artistic directors who are friends of mine, where we can have conversations that supersede artist to artist, but now it's a different type of conversation. And I think because I can have this conversation, it helps me go forth in a variety of different ways. So I want to be able to, that the conversation just gets bigger, and it continues to happen outside of what we know, or what we know to be the norm, with younger artists, with younger presenters, with younger entrepreneurs who we keep constantly saying are doing interesting, exciting work, who don't get invited for a variety of different reasons. But they will get invited to my table, in my circle, and the sort of network we bring around. And how do we combine all those together? So.
I
Didn't mean to look at you.
would, I'd like to see us interact with the larger world more deliberately and more actively. And Bob Martin was saying in our breakout group, he said, you know, if we, I'm just totally paraphrasing him here, but one of the ways to deal with self-congratulation is to bring into this room some people who aren't theater people.
Thank you.
And who, you know, don't have the single-minded focus on that art form. And I think that's a point really, really well taken. And I also, you know, I think there is a way that we say, how do we get people to come to us so we can share our wisdom, as opposed to saying, where do we go to interact with what's happening in the world? So there's that, and I think that helps us then to, you know, write plays that are more affected by and intersecting with the world. And from there, I'll jump to the thing that Chris brought up about our relationship with the critical community. And in a very specific way, I think we have a very dysfunctional relationship with the critics, particularly with the New York Times. And they, you know, there's this question all the time, and they're writing in the Times about how there's no political theater, or that there's only political theater coming from other countries. When in fact, when political theater, I mean, Chris really described this happening with his play, and I've seen it with any number of plays. American political theater often deals with race and class issues which are completely invisible to the two lead critics of the New York Times. And as Chris described, what happens then is that you get these reviews that say this play didn't add up, it didn't make any sense, because it is invisible to them. There is a very clear narrative, but it doesn't add up to someone for whom all the connectors of that narrative they have no ability to see them. So what do we do is the question. I mean, I think there are, you know, Hilton Malls is the only major critic, I think, who's actually writing about theater as it relates to larger issues of the world. That can sometimes be frustrating because he doesn't necessarily write about theater in the way we want him to write about theater, yet I always feel grateful for that level of conversation. And in the National Press, we're not getting it anywhere else. And because the Times still, you can get a good review in every other paper, but if the Times does you in, you're done, And so, but I think we cling to it because because I was thinking, what would I be, so there's a suggestion in my own head that we ask the not-for-profits to stop running pull quotes. We just disengage from this. We stop running pull quotes. And I think, well, okay, if you get a good review, are you really not going to run those pull quotes? Are you going to be willing to do that? And I think what the Times offers is, and the reason it's hard to step away from it, is that they offer legitimization, which is important, which actually is a serious value. It helps us get grants, it helps us get productions, it helps us get any number of things. So I would like to ask the question, for which I don't have an answer. I think on the main, I think many of us would agree that, so many people have stopped reading reviews in the New York Times, right? And when we read them, there's a real, like the emperor gives you thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a blood sport in a certain way. So, and we're happy for ourselves or for our friends when it goes well. And then we're like, oh man, that show took a hit. And so often, I think increasingly, I'm having the experience, other people are having the experience of reading the review and saying, that is not the show that I saw. That does not reflect that at all. And yet we're in this, we're like the abused wife who keeps going back to the abuser because he gave us flowers one day. Really we are. It's hurting us. It's hurting us as it's hurting the American theater because they are systematically taking they don't like ambition. They don't like aesthetic ambition. It's like reading a 10th grade essay. It's compare and contrast, agree and disagree, like and dislike. That's what we're getting in our reviews. Okay, so that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I think it's time to stop them complaining about that and figuring out how to disengage from it. And I think we should disengage from it because I think it is having a major effect on where we can go and what the conversation is aesthetically and politically, and in fact, how the relevance of theater. We want theater to be, people are writing interesting, relevant work, and then the Times says, they're not reflecting that. And so it gets subverted over and over and over and over again. And so I think we need to figure out alternate models of communication, legitimizing forces that we can bring to bear on theater. And then this also goes, and ways to get people to buy tickets. And the New York Times, of course, I apologize because this is primarily an issue in New York. But, no. Okay, good. Then we're already clearly invested. Good, I like that. But, the New York Times isn't even doing that much for us in terms of ticket sales, certainly not what it used to. So in that way, it should be easy for us to disengage. And that brings me to the topic of marketing in theaters. We've talked a little bit about creative capital, and one of the incredible things about creative capital is that they give you money after your project is finished. I always tell the story because it really shows how they, what a big way they do that. When Well was on Broadway for that glorious 10 weeks, Creative Capital still had $10,000 of money for me, and they gave it to me to hire my own publicist so that I could come to the table and say, I want it to go this way. And I think that's an incredibly powerful example of them really believing that it's important to make the art, and then it's also important to get the art into the world, and all the ways that we can do that. And I think institutional marketing, it seems to me, is an oxymoron. It doesn't really make any sense. If you have institutional marketers, their loyalties to the institution. I think somehow, and I know there's a scarcity of resources all over, but I think we need to figure out how to do marketing that is connected to the show, that is invested in the show, And I think three words that come to my mind, and they are creativity, originality, and accountability. Because we don't even know, I think most institutions don't even know how successful or not their marketing is. But, you know, the boilerplate, email blast, you know, whatever, it's not really working for us. Each show is separate, and I keep thinking that, you know, here at Arena they have all these fellows, and one of the things they have is producing fellows, and they're training producers. 13P runs with volunteers, young people who want to be producers. Can we get these young people, assign them to a show, make them invested in the show, and say, figure out what the connection is between this show and you know, and communicate with the artist, and put, you know, we spent on In the Wake, we spent so much time, really successfully. I mean, it was one of the best sort of production and dramaturgical processes I've ever had. There was no focus like that on the marketing, on the connection with the audience.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Lisa? We're going to need to move to the next thing, but no, this is important. The next two things that we're going to focus on in the Institute in terms of conversation, it's interesting that Amy and Lisa, you've touched on them. One is on the relationship between the writer, the literary office, and the decisions of an institution, and what that world is. And the next one is the relationship between marketing, communications, connectivity, and the Newplay, and how that impacts decisions about what's being said and how it's landing. So we do have these two things in motion that we'll spend more time unpacking these important things. So next step already accomplished on those two things in advance. Hey, who else wants to add something before we move into the group next step exercise? Yes.
You guys have a better filtering system than I do, because I really, everything's still like in big chunks inside me, so I don't have, I used to watch these convenings on Twitter, and there was great conversations going on, and there's still great conversations. I don't know why we don't have a laptop at the table. That's a great way to, I mean, I've been trying, you know, but how to bring people, you know, because space, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like Star Trek land now. Like, you can bring somebody here. So because I was like trying to feel like, why do I feel like this outsider that's been lit into like the big house, you know? And it's because I've been watching it on Twitter this whole time. I mean, before this, and then now I'm like disconnected from it. So I don't know. Like, I know that you've been talking to it, but we haven't been listening at the table in the same way. You know what I'm saying?
Hey.
You talk to them, and then we don't hear back the stuff. But if have you guys stood out there, like, right in front of the thing?
It's over there.
It's really interesting, the dialogue.
I read it in every break. My breakouts are Twitter. You guys are in your own conversations, and I read it at every break.
I would love to receive it here somehow and more directly, you know.
Good. Next step.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever feel like, you know, that why did they invite me into the big house? Because I always from the beginning felt like, oh, but tomorrow, man, I'm going to be thrown out.
Yeah.